Okay, so I'll share my screen here. Get that up and then move Zoom off of the shared screen. Can everyone see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this week our challenge or task was to basically add the functionality that makes this a smart shopping list. So you can see we have a new list here. We've got a couple of items on there. We haven't made any purchases yet though. So we see this nice message that we haven't purchased any of these items yet. Initially, the estimated next purchase is going to be based off of the value associated with whichever radio button the user checks when they add a new item. So if we go add an item, I think I want to get some yams, but I've already got some, so not soon. And now if I click on yams, we're going to see, and sorry, just to clarify, the soon is the 7, somewhat soon is the 14, and not soon is the 30. And so we'll see that it estimates that our next purchase will be roughly 30 days. And then for when this is live, the checkbox will be disabled after we've made our current purchase. And so we won't be able to check this again for the next 24 hours. But for the purpose of the demo today, you can see that if we find our yams in the database, we've made one purchase and our time frame, our estimated next purchase is the 30 days. So as we kind of move forward and continue to make more purchases over time, this time frame is instead going to be based on the number of days that have passed between our current purchase and our previous purchase of this item. And then that value is what's going to be plugged into the equation to calculate how many days from today it's estimated that we'll need to purchase that item again. So because the day isn't going to change right now, and we've only made one purchase, we're still going to see 30, but we can see if I click that again, our number of purchases will update in the database. And Viet's going to talk a little bit about the library that we use and some of our code for this week.
Yeah, thanks. So we used the DateFns library, which is something that Lauren had pointed out last week. It's a great library. It contains a ton of functions that work on the date object, and the documentation is really awesome. We use two functions, specifically the difference in days and add days. And if we look at the latest interval variable there, what difference in days does is it's going to return to us a number of full days between the two dates. And that's really important. And I'll point that out later on here, later on in the code. It is possible for difference in days to return not a number if there was no previous purchase date, meaning that the user had added an item but hasn't checked the checkbox yet. So in this case, we default to using that time frame that Brittany had mentioned, the 7, 14, or 30. And if we look at the number of purchases variable there, it also has a default value of 0 in the same case where it just hasn't been, the checkbox has never been checked yet. So if we scroll down a little bit, we can see, can we stop at the update, the query collection update there? Yeah, thanks. So what we're changing here is we used to put into the time frame the 7, 14, or 30 value. What we're doing now is it's going to be what Brittany had mentioned, the return value from the calculate estimate function goes in there. So instead of always being 7, 14, or 30, it kind of gets a little bit more predictive in a way. So the values could be something like 6, 15, 21, something like that. And can we, let's take a look at this function, the get days until next purchase function, which Mike really was awesome in helping us out with. So originally, let's say we purchased something on Friday and it had the next estimated purchase was 7 days. So before it, even if today, on Sunday, 2 days later, it would still return to show up that our next purchase day, or the days until next purchase, would be 7 days. So what this function is doing is telling us, is taking into account that 2 days have passed, and so it will now show us that, you know, instead of 7 days, 5 days is the time until next purchase. What's interesting here is I'd mentioned that the difference in days returns whole number values. So I actually changed the code here a little bit, and it's wrong. So we need to change it back to be a little more accurate. But we're adding 1 to the variable days until next purchase, because if any time any milliseconds are different between the 2 days, it sees that value as, oh, it is now 1 day later. So for instance, if we bought something today and the next purchase, you know, the time until next purchase is supposed to be 7 days, because it's a millisecond off, it would actually say it's 6 days until next purchase. That's why we're adding 1. And oh, one other thing I wanted to point out. So days until next purchase can return a negative value. So in that instance, we're just going to show 0 instead of a negative value, because we, you know, thought it was weird that it could tell the user that, hey, you're negative 2 days until the last purchase. So instead of that, we're showing 0 instead. And I think that's about all we wanted to cover. So do you all have any questions?
How did you find was working with and getting to understand that estimate function that was included? The calculate.
Yeah, we definitely. I think originally we were a little bit lost in it, because it wasn't until Lauren pointed out that we should probably be inputting a whole number of days to it. In the beginning, Brittany and I were giving milliseconds, because I think maybe that was probably carried over from last week, where it's like, oh, milliseconds, let's just input milliseconds, it'll figure it out.
Yeah, I think because when you and Dee had been working on your issue from last week, it seemed to go better for you once you switched to using milliseconds, that we kind of made the assumption in our head, without like really processing the acceptance criteria and what it was really asking for, that we should be working in milliseconds. And then, yeah, once that was pointed out, it made so much more sense. And also, Viet was talking to me about some of the changes that were made, and we were just going over, oh, of course it makes sense that you wouldn't want to just keep putting in the exact same time frame from the user's initial radio button selection. You want that to update. So I think those two things for me, I felt like I understood that estimate JS, and then once those were kind of pointed out, I was like, oh, well, of course, that makes perfect sense. But yeah, I had some trouble wrapping my head around that.
And I think Lauren, Mike, and I think Chris, all three of the mentors had kind of touched on that, and I thought I knew what you were talking about. Turns out I didn't. And until office hours, where Mike was like, "Yeah, I don't think we need to put in 2 different. We need to save 2 different values in the database. We can keep updating time frame."
Yeah, I like how you're ending up updating time frame instead of adding a new value. I think that's a good idea. I like that. And yeah, literally every time I have to relearn how estimates JS works, it takes me a while to relearn how it works. So it is complicated for sure.
But it has some really nice code comments.
It does have really nice code comments, and yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Very good.
Yeah, great stuff, y'all. And I loved how you paid attention to like how to demo it, and also to how to express what was going on under the hood in the UI to make it like more understandable. And there's a lot of kind of back and forth on the PR. So I appreciated you being so flexible with that stuff.
Yeah, the guard default link that you sent was really really cool, Chris. That was Thanks.
Sweet.
And I just want to give a shout out to Viet because you know, I was out of commission for Friday, and you really took on a lot that day. So thank you so much. Thanks, partner.
Thanks like everybody here too for just kind of like helping out, because you know, I mean, I never felt like I was alone on the issue, you know, because everybody was involved. So
Cool. Awesome. Great teamwork.
And
Um,
the patience of the mentors as well, because probably had to tell us the same thing a few times before it really sunk in.
Cool. Awesome. Well, really good. Rachel and Dee. Rachel?
Yeah, I am happy. Hold on one sec. Let me just make sure I have everything. Oh, no.
Oh, wait, she's pinging me. Hang on. She's coming. She's coming.
Hey. I know you just have to stall. Just speak very
Okay.
slowly.
Very, very slowly. So Dee was going to demo our app. So is that okay if we wait just a sec for her
Yeah, of course.
to sign on? Because I was going to talk about the code, but it kind of makes more sense if she demos first.
Yep.
Mike was during office hours on Friday. Mike had to really like literally draw out what he was talking about with the difference in days, and I was still like, I'm gonna need you to do that again.
I feel like I'm just so bad at whiteboarding with the annotations. They just end up looking like, I think remember the one that I wrote, it ended up looking like a dog on accident.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, then that goes over there and that's over there.
It's hard to mouse or like try to use the mouse as like a writing tool, you know?
Well,
It's so nice when people are willing and able to kind of switch gears and go from, you know, verbalizing an instruction or a recommendation to actually like drawing it out for, because I feel like sometimes when you're having a hard time processing in one way.
I'm sorry, guys.
No problem.
I was cooking and I completely lost track of time. I am so sorry. And I thought that for some reason the meeting started at 7:30. I'm so sorry.
No
worries.
problem.
No worries.
Yeah, you actually came just at the perfect time.
Okay.
Dee, if you want to share your screen, we're going to start our demo.
Yeah, sorry. I'm like sweating and everything. I'm sorry.
No, take a breath.
Yeah, we can't tell.
No.
Okay. Can everybody see this?
Yep.
Yeah, you have a huge shopping list. Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so just jumping right in, I guess. Our issue was to have it so a user can filter through the items in their shopping list via a search bar. And so this is basically, it was pretty straightforward. So we have our search bar here. And as the user types, we use the filter method on each item. So, and we use the filter method and the includes method to see if whatever the user is typing is included in any of these items. So if a user wanted to search for like maple syrup, as they're typing, it's being filtered out to find maple syrup, and it doesn't matter from the beginning. You could do like, if you forgot the M, you could do maple syrup and it could still find it. We also use the trim method to remove trailing and leading white space. So you could have all these spaces and you could still find maple syrup. And also, if a user is typing and they want to clear, they can just press the reset button and it clears the input. And then I'll let Rachel take over for some of the accessibility that we implemented.
update. Yeah, so a couple of things we did. First was, per Mike's suggestion, we did add the optional chaining to protect against null pointer errors, just as a safe way since we're accessing nested object properties. That way, if one doesn't exist, it's null, it won't create an error. And then for accessibility, we took some suggestions from Lauren and Chris. We added, an ARIA label for the checkboxes, so that'll help with screen readers. We did the HTML form label for the input box itself, the search bar. And then we also found we were able to remove the form element around the input to also help with our accessibility. Any questions?
What's the type of the button again? I forget. Is it reset or something?
Yeah, the type is reset. We found that it works in like regular JavaScript, but for React, it doesn't work if you don't have like a on-click handler function to pass to it. But with JavaScript, it was working. Like we looked at examples, and just by pressing it, it clears it, but it wasn't working in our case. But we kind of liked it, so we just kept it like that.
I thought that was really cool. I'd never heard of that. Really cool.
Yeah, me either. Cool.
Yeah, great job. I loved how just it worked really well. Like when I was QA testing this, I tried putting in a bunch of like special characters and like doing random things, but I couldn't break it. So it was just really solid.
Nice. Awesome. Well, really good job. Very good job.
Good job, everybody.
Yeah.
Excellent demos.
Cool. I guess, should we jump into the presentation?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Okay. Can everyone see?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. So today we're going to be talking about communication for developers. And, as probably guessed, communication is extremely important. And we would say that it is key. And when going through this, I started thinking about all of the really unique ways that developers, that we get to communicate, that not everybody in other professions would. And today we're going to talk about documentation, pull requests. I added a couple of sections, so self-documenting code, comments in code, commit messages, and also how we can use tests for documentation purposes and communication. So we'll start off with documentation. So documentation is really, really useful when trying to remember, wait, what was it that we did again? It's really good for helping yourself to learn. I personally at my job, I try to have a set goal every every period of time for a number of pieces of documentation that I try to write, just to like enforce my own learning, because it's really, really useful. It's a really good tool for revisiting big decisions that you have. And it's really, really useful for onboarding new team members. And that's where you'll definitely, it's just wonderful if you have somewhere that you go in, they have great documentation to start off. And if you end up somewhere where they don't, you can help to make it. And it helps to avoid institutional or tribal knowledge, where essentially if, let's say everyone on the team understands something, but then they all leave, and so it's kind of lost forever. It's a really good way to help to make sure that you retain that kind of knowledge. And it's also really empowering for all team members, because if you have really good documentation, it can be a really good way for individuals to be able to figure things out on their own, and really take it upon themselves to be able to get, work through a problem, or have a level of self-sufficiency. So some general tips about documentation would be writing for the person who knows the least. So really try to, if you're an expert on something and you're writing the documentation on it, it's really great to try and take a step back and you know, evaluate some of the assumptions that you may have or underlying knowledge. It's really good to optimize for a person who needs quick reference, because a lot of the times when you're going into documentation, you're just really just, you want a command or you want a quick little recipe or something like that. And we'll look at that in the example here. It's really great to have examples or recipes and visuals. And one thing that I find when you're working on a team, and oftentimes documentation can be scattered all over the place, and it's really good to have it easily accessible. So for example, you may in a future role be working with Confluence or some sort of documentation site, and that would be good for certain pieces of onboarding documentation. But when it comes to like, how do you start up your application or something like that, maybe that should live in a README in with the application with the code base. So you can, I think it's really nice if you can figure out a way to make it easy to access. And finally, one of the things that I find really important with documentation is really, if you're writing it, I like to have fun with it, and I like to add humor if I can. If I read documentation where it's in the first person and is kind of written nicely and informally, sometimes it's really fun to read. So that's just something that I enjoy. Really good example here would be with React Router. I really like here, we were talking about optimizing for quick reference. It's really nice how they separate out their examples on one side and any copy and paste things, and then have explanations for it in the middle. And yeah, I mean, in general, this is a really, really great documentation site, and there's lots of really, really good examples. And there's also lots of really bad examples, but we're not gonna focus on those ones, I guess. Yeah, any questions or thoughts so far? Does anyone have any documentation sites that they love? Can think about it. We'll come back to that later. Cool. So the next one is pull requests, which I think that everyone's been getting really, really good experience having really, really great pull request descriptions, and they've been, absolutely stupendous. And I think you've gotten an idea for how, or like why we would do it. It really helps to give reviewers context about your code. You can take it as some time to walk reviewers through your code. And I also would say having really good pull request descriptions and nice pull requests is a really good way to make friends at work. Because if you just open one up and give no description, no help, and it's a huge pull request, you're probably not going to make a lot of friends. But if you have a really nicely documented one, it's a great way to for everyone to really make sure that they like having you on the team. So again, I think everyone has had amazing pull requests so far in the descriptions. And I've been seeing a lot of screenshots. We could maybe add some more GIFs. I don't, and videos are great. If you can, have something with a demo or something like that. Links for to code in the reference. And also everyone's been doing a really great job of self-reviewing and it's, a way where you can kind of walk people through the code and include decisions, explanations about decisions. And then also one thing that's really, really great is if you can keep PRs really small and narrowly scoped. That's something that I think a lot of people would appreciate when they're doing the reviews. Yeah. So just one example here, but honestly, this example looks a lot like what everyone here has been doing. So I think everyone's very, very familiar, and based on the evidence, I don't think we need to walk through this too much because you all already do this. So wanted to have a section on self-documenting code. And so pretty much when we say self-documenting code, all that really means is just having code that explains itself and is readable. And also, if you can do really good self-documenting code within a team, so everyone has the same standards around how they do it, it's a really great way to promote stylistic consistency. And ideally, in a code base, it would look like just one person wrote all of the code, so that there's no distinction and you're not able to see other people's styles. So some tips for writing self-documenting code are variables, 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 really using variables in order to explain things. Avoid abbreviations because they can really, you may think it's obvious to you, but it may not be obvious to everyone, and it may not be obvious to you in a week. Talk to workshop names and also update names. Just because it means something one day, it may not mean it when you went back into refactor. And also, I think it's really great if you're on a team to adopt a style guide of some sort, so that everyone can have a consistency for how they self-document. So I included a link to the Airbnb style guide, which is a really great one, and I think that you'll realize that you become an ultra nerd when you spend your Friday night reading the Airbnb style guide and find that it's a really good read. Also a link to the naming cheat sheet, which I think has been shared a few times. And wanted to go to this link with some tips for self-documenting code, and wanted to, let's see. Oh, yeah, just, this one, it just has some generally nice tips about, not using just random numbers. You can give numbers variable names, so you can explain what the heck they are. And then also things like using tiny little named functions in order to kind of explain your way through. And ideally, a function should do one thing and do one thing well, and you can explain exactly what that one thing is. And it makes things really nice and easy to read. So that, and I'm gonna keep on forgetting to open in a new tab. And yeah, so there's some team, I think Lauren at one time had mentioned that, on some teams, they insist that everything should be self-documenting and you should never have comments in your code. And then others are really big proponents of comments. And I think that there's always kind of a middle ground. And here I'll show you an example of where comments would really be preferable to self-documentation. But comments are a really great way to give your team context behind your code. You can use them in order to answer questions that the code itself doesn't. Sometimes the code may be really readable in terms of what it's doing step by step, but a comment may help to add additional value for why something's being done, or kind of summarizing what everything is. And as I said, sometimes self-documenting code is not always feasible or practical. So tips for comments would be really focusing on why things are being done. When possible, try to keep comments nice and short. And then if you do have to have really, really long comments, formatting is great. So we can take a look. Didn't open in a new tab again. So we can take a look here at an example where, this is the kind of formatting that is really nice for a long code comment. And, we can see that this is very clean, nice looking code, but the comment really gives you some, can give you some context around, like, you know, what's it there for? What's the reason for its existence? And yeah, so very helpful. It's helpful to have nice comments. And then wanted to show an example of where you know, self-documenting code can kind of get you into trouble. Oftentimes would be if it has if you've got a huge variable name. So let's in this example here, if it was self-documenting, your variable would be make sure user appears new to subscription API, which is just really a lot of letters there. And so this is an instance where maybe, yeah, comment would actually be a little bit better, right? Cool. Yeah, so next, commit messages. And commit messages are also just like we've been seeing with the other communication means, are really great to give context for changes, and specifically they're really useful in giving a historical context for things, because usually you're looking at commit messages in the future, looking, you know, back and trying to understand reasons why decisions were made. And they're really helpful when debugging, and they can also be used for automation of certain things, like creating change logs within versions. And usually you'll feel like commit messages aren't really important until they're really, really important, which, you know, it would never be fun to be on a war room call where you have, you know, 20 people looking through your commit history, and then it's all just, you know, horrible, or, you know, not very well documented. So again, we really want to focus on the why. If we want to know the what, we would just look at the code. But the commit message is really there to tell us why did we make a change. And it's also, you know, different teams will have different standards, and some people want to write it in the present tense or the past tense, or have a space here, or have a period or whatever. And I think it doesn't matter. In my opinion, I think that what's really important is just that you have a specific standard and that you stick to it, because oftentimes the commits will be used in a searchable way when debugging. They may be looking for you know, trying to grep one single thing, and it's really nice to if everybody has that standardized, it makes it really useful. So included just some example standards. On my team, we use the Angular JS standard, which is pretty much, you just have, you know, a type, which they have a list of types, and then you can include the scope and a general subject of it, so you can have just real quickly get an idea for what happened. And then the body is used for a bit of explanation. And yeah, but there's all sorts of different standards out there. So yeah. And then finally, I absolutely love tests. And I thought that it could be interesting to just chat a little bit about how tests can be used for documentation. Oftentimes, you know, when I go into an application and I'm trying to understand what happens, I'll look at the test to see, okay, what is this thing actually supposed to be doing? And so they can really explain the intended behavior of the app. And you know, as the nice, obviously, they go and help alert devs to changing app behavior when you're making a breaking change. So how to write communicative tests, I'd say, are having clear descriptions. And I created just some little, I thought it would be useful if we could just look at what we know already, which is our application. So I just made a few tests just for our list component, right? And here we can just see that for a list component, if we go in, we just say, what does the list component do? This isn't exhaustive, I just wrote a few. But we can have a description up here saying, when there are no items, then it displays your shopping list is currently empty to the user with a link to the add item page. And then in there, we have that is what it does. But the point being that tests are a really great way to help to document the code. And when writing tests, I think it's really important to focus more on readability than trying to be clever with heavy abstractions. It's okay to repeat code a lot in your tests because it's really just important that people are able to read what's going on, and you don't have to focus as much on heavy performance or anything like that until it gets crazy. But yeah. And so, yeah, just some additional links there. And yeah, so does anyone have any questions, or what do you feel like your experience so far has been with documentation, PR, descriptions, just general communication in development? Very open-ended question. Has anyone been, I guess, surprised by any means of communication that are different in development than in other things that you do?
I mean, I think I had reached out to somebody in like the previous cohort, that Collab Lab cohort, about like their experience, and they talked about pull requests and how important that was. And I mean, I may have my initial thought was like, pull requests are not that important. There's kind of this thing you do, but I mean, I think they're really cool now. Just it's a great way to just kind of show the entire team help the entire team understand what's going on with your task for that time period. And yeah, I think the conversation that's been going on and the pull requests have been really helpful and informative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think the primary way that I communicate with a lot of developers on my team is via pull requests. Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
I really like seeing the use of images and GIFs and things like that you mentioned, because in hygiene, if I was trying to explain a concept and it was challenging to explain, I would usually grab a piece of paper and start drawing it out. And that was like having the visual was what helped to really get the idea across. So it makes sense to me. Like, it seems like a natural way to communicate. And I like seeing that in the pull requests.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I ever see pull requests where they include screenshots or things like that, or videos or anything like that, I'm always ultra grateful, for sure. Yeah, cool. All right. Well, today we have covered documentation, pull requests, talked about self-documenting code, comments in code, and commit messages and tests. And yeah, so thank you very much.
Yay. I really love that you added tests to this presentation. I think that it's such a great way to get to know an application if people are writing really instructive tests, like how does this component work? Oh, let me look at the test. And if someone's written really nice descriptive tests, I just get a great idea of how something can work.
Yeah,
super useful.
Sure. And I'll push up that branch if y'all want to take a look. And there's also a utility that I created if you wanted to just play with some that would make some of the testing easier.
That's great. Thank you, Mike.
Awesome. All right. So you did this last week already, but did you for this week decide what issues you wanted to grab off the board?
Everyone was this week. We were all flexible.
Oh, okay.
I do have a question though. I guess the question is, Viet, do you want to end up working with dates and times for a third week in a row? Because that might help us decide.
I don't mind working with dates. I know they're kind of tricky, but yeah, I'm okay if that's how if that's what we decide.
That's how it lands. I don't think it's as this one isn't as bad because you really can just use like the time frame value, I think, that you already have.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking that
do any manipulation, I don't think. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was thinking that maybe even that function that Mike kind of steered us towards during office hours. I don't know if that's something that would be useful in this situation, or if it's just strictly the time frame value that's going to be used.
Well, and there was a conversation, I'll see if I can find it, but somebody was asking about that issue.
Oh, in Slack.
Oh yeah, I saw that too in cohort winter 2021.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I'll share that in our, get out of the way, pictures.
I did just find it.
Here's the link and I'll paste it in Slack here. I think this is the one you were talking about.
Oh yeah, in Slack. I'm like watching the Zoom
yeah,
chat. You very
Slack.
clearly said Slack. Yeah.
That's all right. All right, let's while we're thinking about that, let's go through the issues. So just let me know if you can't see my screen. I just saw Kent Dodds tweeted this out today and it was such a good idea because you know how we always ask in Zoom, can you see my screen, right? And then it requires a response, but a good way to do it is to say, let me know if you can't see my screen, and then you can just get started.
That's such a programmer thing to say. Just like, oh, okay, well, we're going to reverse it and early return from that. So
yeah. Good one. Okay, let me know if you can't see my screen. All right, issue 11. As a user, I want to be able to delete items from my shopping list so that my list isn't cluttered with items I don't want to buy in the future. So it's possible our users may make an error when entering an item or may decide they won't be buying a certain item again in the future. Let's help them keep their lists tidy. So the acceptance criteria for this issue is the user is able to delete an item from the shopping list. Before deleting, prompt the user to confirm that they really want to delete the item to prevent accidental deletions. And finally, deletion should cause the associated record in the database to be deleted. Questions about that particular story?
Seems clear.
Yeah. All right. And then number 12, as a user, I want to view a list of my shopping list items in order of how soon I'm likely to need to buy each of them again, so that it's clear what I need to buy soon. The possible item states are as follows. Need to buy soon, which is fewer than 7 days. Need to buy kind of soon, between 7 and 30. Need to buy not soon, more than 30 days. And then there's an inactive state, when there's only one purchase in the database or the purchase is really out of date. And they define that as the time that has elapsed since the last purchase is 2 times what was estimated. All right. So the acceptance criteria for this one, the items in the list are shown as visually distinct. For example, with a different background color on the list item, or something like that. This is up to you, but visually distinct in some way, according to how soon the item is expected to be bought again, either soon, kind of soon, not soon, or inactive. Items should be sorted by the estimated number of days until next purchase. Items with the same number of estimated days until next purchase should be sorted alphabetically. And finally, items in the different states should be described distinctly when read by a screen reader. So some kind of ARIA label. I think that there is a mock for this in the mock-ups that describe what kind of like ARIA label maybe needs to be on the checkbox, so that when it's read by a screen reader, they know that it is that kind of soon or not soon state. Okay, questions about this one, because this one's a mouthful.
I have a question about screen readers related to Chris's question. Do you all have a recommended screen reader that you use, or?
If I'm testing, I just use VoiceOver on my Mac. I don't have a Windows setup right now, but on Windows you'd use NVDA, which is an open source thing that you download. And then you can also test on your phone. I haven't done this in a while, but you can also test it out on your phone. I need to look up all the instructions to figure out how those things work again. But I just use VoiceOver for testing my Mac.
I think Windows also has a built-in one. I haven't personally used it, but I'll throw out this link just in case y'all want to try the native one instead of a third party. But also there's lots of good third-party tools out there for it. And they all kind of sort of work about the same way, or should anyway. So
yep. If you get really deep into accessibility testing, different screen readers are different. So I know that, oh, yeah, it's coming back. I know that sometimes an issue that will be present on one screen reader will be fine on a different screen reader. So it's almost, it's very comparable to different browsers, right? Like different browsers behave a little bit differently. So, but let's just go with VoiceOver. That will be good for our purposes.
It seems like this will be a good time for issue 13, organizing it and figuring out like visually how things are going to look. That would be a good team conversation.
Yeah, I think in terms of making the items visually distinct for this time, you don't need to go super overboard, just so they're visually distinct in some kind of way, the easiest way possible, because when you get to issues 13 next week, in fact, let me just pull that one up. Right, so this issue is what we work on as a whole group for the last 2 weeks altogether. And so this is where all of those decisions are made. Like, what do we want the app to look like? What's our theme? What do we want to communicate to the users visually? What are we going to do? Styling, CSS, do we want to use a library? Do we just want to do everything ourselves, et cetera, et cetera? So I would recommend probably like leaving all of those decisions until the last 2 weeks. And for this, just really just focus on the sorting for this. And then for the visually distinct part, it can be whatever. It doesn't have to be what the final solution is going to be. Do we want to look at what Golfo was asking?
That would be great.
Okay, so Golfo is a mentor for the Europe, Africa cohort. And she's asking, according to the issue, an item is inactive when there's only one purchase in the database or the purchase is really out of date, blah, blah, blah. I think that the second part is very clear, but I don't understand why an item is inactive if it's only purchased once. This is a good question. In the wireframe, I'll pull that up in a sec, only the backgrounds of the checkboxes have a distinct color, but in the issue it says that you can have a different background color on the list item. So yes, as long as it's visually distinct in some way, it doesn't have to be a different background color on the checkbox. In fact, that's really hard to do. Just heads up, it's challenging to customize checkboxes if you're not using some kind of third-party library. So heads up, if you go that route, it's a little challenge. And then let's see. So let's see if there are answers to this question. What did Stacy say? Great question. I think there's some wiggle room here for your team to make product decisions, but I think that requirement is in there because if you just buy an item once, the app won't have another date to determine when you might need to buy it again and would therefore assume you only wanted to buy that item one time ever. But I do agree that it's confusing. So if you all want to discuss other approaches, feel free. Yeah.
Would we be able to know for a single purchase when to estimate the next purchase based on the radio button selection that they make of soon, kind of soon or not soon? Like,
yeah,
wouldn't that give you data to sort of figure that out?
Yeah, I think that that's happening now, right? When, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you, in the app right now, when you make a purchase, it uses that time frame value as the value, right? So if when you added that item, if you added apples to your database and you put it in at 7, when you make the first purchase, it will keep it at 7.
Yes.
And it's not till the second purchase then that you're able to compare the two dates, the purchase dates. So yeah, I think it would be a perfectly, like, it's up to you to decide, as long as you communicate that decision. This inactive state doesn't necessarily have to be if there's only one purchase in the database. Like, it has that number 7 or 14 or 30 tied to it already, so you could use that instead of having it be inactive.
It makes sense though. Like I understand what Stacy is saying, where the app basically is saying, okay, if you bought this twice, I know you want to buy it more frequently. But if it's only purchased once, like, the app isn't making that assumption that the user wants to buy it more often. So.
It's something that they buy often, right? Yeah. So I think that's a good team decision, something to talk about and make a decision on.
Okay. Dee, did you have any preference on which issue you work on this week?
No.
It's just rock, paper, scissors.
Who do I have? If nobody wants to claim one, I'll put Dee and Brittany on the first issue, and I'll put Viet and Rachel on the second issue. So if you'd like to claim one.
Yeah,
that works just fine. Yeah. we all seem pretty indecisive right now.
Okay, sounds good. So Dee and Brittany will do issue 11. They're deleting, and Viet is the lucky winner of working with the dates. Viet and Rachel again too, right? Didn't you work together that week on the crazy days? No, it was Dee and
left out.
That's right. Okay. So Rachel and Viet will do issue 12 with the sorting. Okay. Cool. So you all go ahead and assign yourselves to those. And go ahead. What were you going to say, Mike?
Oh, I wanted to mention, thanks, Brittany, for you made an extra issue, right?
Yeah,
the loading. Nice.
I did, yeah. Thank you. I'm glad that was okay. I know we talked about it being okay, but I was like, is this really okay?
Yeah, Oh, yes, for sure. Go for it. And in fact, some people, I think, make issues and then they keep on adding to the functionality after Collab Lab is done.
And
Cool.
I was tempted in the presentation to have a section on story writing, right? Because that's something you sometimes will have to do.
Yeah.
So you got a little bit of experience with story writing.
Yeah, and when I was in an internship with after the boot camp, my mentor was basically saying, like, try to communicate it so that your teammate can understand it in 5 minutes or less. Because if it takes longer, that's using up like valuable time. So that was something I was trying to keep in mind.
Cool. Good idea. All right, everyone. Great work this week. This is, one more week really of tackling these kinds of issues, and then we get to polish everything up. So it's very exciting. Of course, let us know if you have questions. And then Chris is doing office hours this week. So that's awesome. And yeah, next week we'll have retrospective. So be thinking of those appreciations and how we can go forward with good ideas. And awesome. All right, everyone, have a wonderful week and we'll see you soon.
Cool. Bye,
See
y'all.
ya.
Bye.
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 Bye.